Good evening, friends and colleagues. I am not going to be as subject specific as Maggie was. I very much emphasize was for losing actually the ability to present those elements that have created San Francisco for what it truly is. I regret hearing her story. I'm hearing it for the first time with a level of detail, have concerns about how it affects the Bay region, but I was asked or tasked with the idea of reporting to you about my farewell to the Planning Commission. And while I sat down and thought about what to really talk to you about, I came across notes to the 40th anniversary of Coalition of San Francisco Neighborhoods on December 12th, 2012. That's exactly 14 years ago, where I spoke to a large gathering, which that evening gave me an award. And I felt very obligated in my second term as planning commissioner to kind of really give all of you an idea of what I saw at that time, what I could perceive the challenges to be. And as I read over that particular set of thoughts a few days ago, it actually made me feel sad, alarmed, and in a way justified in my concerns with which I'm leaving planning today. And let me go with you, and I'm not sure who was at that dinner in 2012. I think I see George Wooding, who I recall was there. But there may be others of you who were there, perhaps Maria Eliza. I see her name up there. I remember her for many, many years. There may be others of you who were there at that time.
I was there too.
Okay, that is just, I appreciate everybody who was there. And perhaps it will be a little bit of a chilling talk for you because I feel I owe it to you, as I did then, to speak truth to power. Um, uh, 24 years ago, on that December 18th dinner, I received an award and I spoke observing the following, and I'm reading verbatim to you what I said at that time. Like seasonal changes, the recent events in city politics may potentially signal darker times ahead, and that may hold for planning. Every Thursday, though, almost every Thursday, there is an unfailing bright light, and that bright light is San Francisco and what all of you stand for, neighborhood activism and citizen engagement. Reflecting on those few sentences from then, I observe today that that light has been greatly dimmed with an overt intention to eliminate public participation from decision-making, ministerial approvals, consequential, relentless streamlining have sidelined neighborhood voices and have made obsolete discretionary review and conditional use authorizations. That has a strong effect not only on what a planning commission can and is able to do, but the largest effect is on the citizens and the neighbors of San Francisco. Back to 2012, going on with what I said at that time. I greatly respect the coalition and all neighborhood representatives who I've worked with and those I have simply observed in action. I find myself inspired by your commitment to your neighborhoods and the city as a collective whole. I find myself touched by your selfless actions in taking a stand for the greater good and against private agendas. I find myself no, that's wrong. At that time, I observed that power is profitable and money is powerful. And at that time, I thanked all of you that you stood for this particular aspect, not having less traction in San Francisco. But as of recent, Money is the only language that matters in decision making. This is now coupled with the economic cost of constant chaos, initiated by Sacramento's insatiable need for increased control over all matters of city planning. This affects not only us, it actually affects most of us in San Francisco, but it also has its ripple effect through the state of California. I call it cost, corruption, chaos. In December 2012, I spoke about all of those aspects that make San Francisco a great city. We all know of them. Actually, Maggie touched on a few of them: the natural setting, unparalleled physical beauty, a gentle climate, a superb spatial order, and a diverse, vibrant citizenry. What makes this a great city? It invokes emotions in all of us, reason why we're even talking tonight. San Francisco is a real city, one that thrives on the power of its diversity, its edgy public engagement, and its citizens who act untiringly urban. So what is the common thread that is the basis for our shared concerns regarding the future of our cities? Those are 2012 thoughts. We have, at that time, I said, we have witnessed the pitfalls when it comes to commodifying the city through bargaining away shadow budgets for protected open spaces, as with the Transit Center District Plan and many others that followed. This particular issue is for a final decision tomorrow in front of the current Planning Commission. We are trying to eliminate shadow protection on public open spaces. Onward, commercialization of open spaces, Maggie touched on that, and other public assets like Beach Chalet, Golden Gate Park, Justin Herman Plaza, Civic Center, the waterfront in its various aspects, and the list goes on. These are 2012 thoughts mixed into what we're observing and experiencing today. Promoting unsustainable development practices with projects that are economically, socially, and environmentally unsustainable. Treasure Island, Yerba Buena Island, Park Merced, Central Soma, the list goes on. Densifying the city haphazardly. This is at the expense of large numbers of rent-controlled housing units in a historic open space setting. Park Merced, all Sacramento SBs and ABs, and last but not least, the family upzoning plan. What I said in 2012 has only exemplified and become more and more reality in the past 14 years. I went on to speak about increasing height and intensifying uses in areas that contradicted the code and basic principles of San Francisco Urban Design Plan and the Waterfront Design and Access Plan, as with 8 Washington Street, the Northern Waterfront, Pier 3032, the Central Waterfront, this leading today to upzoning relentlessly driven by Sacramento and the real estate developer industry. Onward, spatial area planning, special use district zoning, spot zoning, amending of plans, excessive and unbridled granting of variances, exceptions, and exemptions, reauthorization of increased entitlements with a large number of projects which employed these techniques. This goes on. It has accelerated between 2012 and 2026. Literally every week, somebody came back and wanted more and got the approval, because with the 4-3 vote on the commission, there is no way, or rarely a way, to uphold those principles that ultimately tie all of us together. When I was asked in 2012 of what do we need to sustain San Francisco as a great city, I said then, as I say today, we need to assert and redefine common ground as we move ahead. The profit motive can't be the overwhelming force of development at the expense of all other. Form follows profit can't become the new aesthetic principle of our time. Common good must have traction. We need to reaffirm basic principles. What do we have in common? And how do we want to go forward together? Emphasis on together. What are our common interest values by which we want to regulate the city planning and design? As citizens, we need to redefine public interest values similar to what drew you all together 40 years ago when there were concerns about height and bulk that unified you as a coalition. Where do I stand? In 2012, I opined that I strongly believe that the quality of urban life of our city depends on common values, efforts, and visions that I call common ground. I believe that we need to base the decisions about the future of our city on an urban design plan that embraces public interest values and either reaffirms or expands on the basic principles of the urban design plan authored by Alan Jacobs in 1971. That is the evolutionary history of a good city. We cannot basically reinvent from scratch as we did with the family zoning plan that is based on no principles whatsoever. It is not even a plan. It is basically a graphic depiction of where people feel they can achieve height at the highest rate of return. And I believe that we need to move forward by making decisions about the future of the city with integrity, consistency, and with a more metered approach for exceptions, exemptions, and one-of-a-kind rules. As a planning commissioner, I will continue looking at all city matters, both from the perspective as an urban designer and from the viewpoint of an engaged citizen. Today, 14 years later, I've tried fighting for what I believe in, and I continue believing in it today. This is, for me, when I read it to you, a sobering statement as I reflected even then on the dangers ahead, most of which have become reality today. Thank you.
And please raise your hand if you have any questions. Mary Eliza, go ahead.
Okay, I wrote it in the chat, so I would have an easy way to say this. There are two issues I've discovered this week. One of them has to do with the Prop M office entitlements that are now being questioned, I guess, by some people in the planning department, perhaps City Hall. And my question is, do you think backtracking on Prop M office entitlements will help the city in their efforts to build more affordable housing if the entitlements are changed to allow housing instead of office towers?
I'm speaking as a practitioner, not as a commissioner. I stopped being on the planning commission on June 25th. So I'll give you my opinion as a professional. As a professional, I believe that tying up any form of entitlement for excessively long time, be that office or whatever, that includes housing projects which were never realized, ultimately have us work without a set of teeth. We are completely overbuilt in office. We have a very high rate of vacancy in San Francisco, and there are people who have been sitting on these entitlements forever and ever and ever. And I believe that given a certain way of resolving that equitably, with looking also at location of what sites we may be freeing up for other uses, that is a good idea. However, that cannot be done in the abstract. Not all office sites are suitable for housing. And I've seen many, many shortcuts and short-sighted decisions being made where people do not use the practice of how we actually build and make decisions that free sites which are not suitable for what people think they may be for.
Okay, I just have one other question, if that's okay. We recently heard that the Albertsons are claiming they have 50-year covenants that allow them to control whatever's on this property that they claim they own. And I'm just wondering if there's any way these covenants could be broken so that, I don't know, whatever your opinion is, it's not obviously a legal opinion. So I'm just
right. I think you're making a very critical point. I am not an attorney. I am not a land use attorney. And I do not know what covenants are in comparison to actual ownership law. So covenants, many developments have covenants, but they do not necessarily speak to rights of ownership. So that's a very subtle point, and I am not quite sure why people have those types of long-term, excessively long-term rights that I don't hardly ever see in any other property in San Francisco. So there is a background, a historic background I am unfamiliar with.
Thank you.
Charles, you're next. Go ahead and unmute. Charles, you're still muted. Okay, he may. Oh, there. Go ahead.
Okay, here we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Kathrin, I want to thank you very much. I was there at that dinner in 2012. As a matter of fact, I believe you and your husband sat with my wife and I there, and then we heard you speak as you got the award later on. So again, I'm privileged to be here 14 years later and to hear your voice again. And I appreciate all the words that you've said. If it is possible, if you could put what you said 14 years ago in the chat or send it to Deborah or somehow get your remarks to us so that we can go over them again and be inspired again. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
George, you're next.
Hi, Kathrin.
Hi, George.
I want to start by thanking you again for your service. I was at that dinner and I did get the opportunity, I think on the 25th, to say goodbye. And I've seen you over the years fighting for the citizens. And you seemed often to be the only person who was
I think George is frozen.
Yeah, George is frozen.
George, unmute yourself.
goodness. I'm sorry. Kathrin, I wanted to thank you for your service again. I was there at the dinner. I was there on June 25th. I want to thank you for your kind note. And I was just going to say quickly that I often felt you were the voice of reason and you spoke on behalf of citizens as opposed to big money. And the problem I saw too, as you were just talking, is everything that's been happening as the city has become controlled by large amounts of money. Mayor Lurie became the mayor by spending only $9 million. He's a multi-billionaire. So his friends are billionaires. They turned the citizens initiative. They don't use it for citizens. They use it for billionaires now. Everything seems to be, they've given the keys to the city to developers. I am currently fighting the Shadow Initiative by Bilal Mahmoud, and I'm still fighting, except I can count my victories on one hand and my losses. I don't have enough fingers. So, anyhow, I just did want to say thank you.
Glenn, you're next. You're muted, Glenn.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to thank you also, Kathrin. When I came to the Planning Commission and would make a point you seem to be the only one that was really interested in the point of view of CMPS. And for that, I always wanted to thank you for that. That being said, I have been interested in artificial intelligence, and I was wondering if you had any idea what is going to be the future is going to be like. Do you have the same opinion of it as Bernie Sanders, who feels this could be the end of civilization? Look forward to your comment. Thank you.
Without hesitation, I would agree with Bernie Sanders. I believe that the human element of caring, of analysis on a much deeper level than what any artificial intelligence can deliver, we are losing the ability to empathize, to connect, and to be really human. Unfortunately, and I do not want to kind of put salt into any of our wounds because I think we all feel the changes, and I talked about them, I think, with sufficient clarity, is that the latest summaries of planning projects, which when you bring them up on the web, what it's accessible to you as the audience, are generated by AI. And that is for me a chilling acknowledgement, because why do we still have a planning department? Because all you have to do is push a button in order to have something spit out of what you don't want to read anyway.
Maggie, you're next.
Hello. I would like to say how touched I was to hear you speak, Kathrin, and what you just read. I would like to get posted also because I would like to reread it to our Sea Scouts of what your service was. And we happened to be there because we wanted to do a public comment, but a lot of the kids had to leave, and that day it went longer. But we did hear you at City Hall in front of the supervisors that day. So I think some of the kids will be relating to what you said. I was very touched and really well written. So I was a photojournalist and did marketing. I worked with the UN FPA for 30 plus years and worked all over the world in like over 100 countries. But I lived here, and the ocean really healed me and helped me stay connected, even though I saw a lot of things that were really disturbing and sad around the world. And that is what moved me to get Sea Scouts involved. One of the things that we do there is the kids connect with each other with these hard things to do, and they do it together. And a lot of our kids don't do anything on the internet at all. Like they completely, some are homeschooled, some are just looking for an alternative. A lot of them are super smart and want to have a community. And it just breaks my heart sometimes, the breakthroughs that youth have just in a few sessions of coming out with the Sea Scouts. So I'm privileged to invite all of you. I know we might have a few people that like to start volunteering. And I would like to ask you, is it normal for a department to use a permit from 19 years ago? Greg is on the phone, and he and I were the only ones last year. We didn't know each other at the time, but when SFRP announced that they were going to city planning to use the same CEQA of 19 years ago, we both wrote in and asked to have it officially attached to the CEQA, request. But they didn't actually need to do a new CEQA request because they're using the one from 19 years ago. And it never went to the commissioners, the planning commission, and never went to the city supervisors. It's all absolutely internal with just Kat Anderson at the governing of the chair for the commission. So anyway, please tell me about how that process works, because it just breaks my heart that this happened.
Again, I'm not a planning commissioner. I'm not speaking like one, but I think under specific circumstances, there is a tendency of the city to find shortcuts or interpretations that elude of what typically is done. in your quoting what happened at Gaslight Cove and the attempt to sideline US Sea Scouts, I am thinking about a time of very painful deliberations of what happened on Treasure Island. Before I joined the Planning Commission, I sat on the Treasure Island cab because I was interested in that as an urban design plan, as a physical plan, and I hated the plan, which was the original plan. Not that the second one is all that there is, but the first one was absolutely horrible because it put everything on the east-facing shore rather than having the island speak to the city. Now you could question how this new development speaks to the city, and I had lots of bad feelings about it, but that is not why I'm saying it. I want to bring up the Treasure Island Sailing School.
Yes.
When the master plan was created, and I kept insisting that the guidelines and everything physical about the harbor and the sailing school needed to be an integral part of the plan. There was an attempt by the city to sideline the plan and saying, we're going to do that later, with the attempt that they already had identified some money entity, as far as I could tell, out of San Diego to take over of what that would look like. And the first thing that fell by the wayside was the Treasure Island Sailing School. It was one of the most important permanent public components for city children to come to the island and learn how to sail together with their families, because there was nobody. There are relatively few people in San Francisco who have a sailboat. There are relatively few people who have the ability to go to the waterfront, launch a canoe or a paddleboard or whatever you all do these days. And whatever I did, it was impossible to get a commitment that that was an integral part of the planning, including the EIR, et cetera, except when I can't go there because this is being recorded. I'll let it go. Anyway, this was very parallel to what I observed you telling us on Gaslight Cove. And what I'm saying is, regarding your specific question about an EIR in 19 years, everything about an EIR is the scope and the type of projects, the alternatives which were evaluated in that EIR. If they are quantitatively and qualitatively relatively the same, people will say that the basis of the EIR and the parameters which it examined are still the same. However, if it is all of a sudden a completely different project, I believe that with a strong CEQA attorney, one could basically say, hey, it isn't quite so. And that is why people now make a very concerted effort to find a way to challenge the family zoning plan. The EIR, which governs the creation of the housing element, the rewrite of the housing element, turned out to be very different from what Mr. Louis, Mayor Louis, upzoning plan is. And that is where a well-known CEQA attorney is basically trying to help the coalition of not the coalition of San Francisco Neighborhoods United, San Francisco Neighborhoods United, to basically clarify of what an EIR would owe us to figure out.
Could I ask another follow-up question on that? Would that be okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So in this particular case, Greg is on the call. We both wrote in saying that permit that SFRP got 19 years ago was to recondition the fuel dock, not to decommission it. That's why we have all these emergency responders and the bar pilots and everybody's so upset, because they never been asked about taking it out.
When you're describing Clipper Cove and other places, the entire Sausalito waterfront is determined by private sailing clubs, which all use Clipper Cove for fueling. It's a clean, well-designed facility, and I cannot imagine that anybody who owns a boat, and there are quite a few people who do, would basically not start screaming murder, because the entire kind of tech industry brought sizes of boats and expansions of mooring facilities to the Bay Area. And without those fueling places, what are you going to do?
So I am on the California Boating and Waterways for this specific reason, to get more access points for the youth to get on the water and for people to get on the water.
Yeah.
And I know for sure that Richardson Bay has not been dredged since the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So there used to be money to dredge through our own division, but there's no money anymore. So everything's filling in. But really rich people who will have the deep anchorage in the West Harbor, because SFRP, that deal that they have, they're probably going to get, $200 million from PG&E. They'll be using 100 million of it to dredge 14 and a half feet in the West Harbor. So they're taking money, they're different properties. So the East Harbor, they call it, but it's called legally Gas House Cove.
Mm.
More than half of that money that they're getting for remodeling, they're taking out of Gas House Cove and sticking it to dredge deep for mega yachts in the West Harbor. And they're not committing to rebuild a fuel dock at all, even though the original thing said to do it. So I'm just saying, I just don't know if I'm ready to, I know financially I cannot hire a lawyer. And I know that Greg doesn't want to hire a lawyer either. So,
well, it would be just more, there's a simple question that you ask: can an EIR 19 years later still apply? And the basic answer, and I'm not a secret attorney, is: has the project itself changed? Quantitatively and qualitatively, it sounds as the additional dredging would definitely be an issue.
I did have someone who is a CEQA paralegal who works with huge lawyers in Sacramento review it. And it's 150 pages that SF Planning put together with SFRP. They paid an outside firm $5.5 million to write these 150 pages. And all it is about dredging. It doesn't have a single word in it about the fuel dock. So,
well, I like to suggest something to you, and I think if I understand what's going on correctly, what's happening on the land side is directly a reflection of what is suggested on the water side. As we are trying to desperately intensify San Francisco to become a Miami Beach, the sites that you're suggesting, all waterfront sites, are all up for mega yachts and everything else, because what happens on the land wants direct access to the water. So that is basically the reality.
Yes, that is the reality, but it's not okay, because it's a
by a long shot, no.
It's a public land trust. It's supposed to be for public use and public access. And we're San Franciscans paying these fees where the mega yacht people don't even live in town that are paying for the slip fees.
Well, I mean, that holds also for how the port has changed its attitude. I said I stepped off the port waterfront design review the same day that I left the planning commission, and I stepped on that body 2 years before I became a planning commissioner. So every project on the waterfront owned by the Port of San Francisco is the project I very carefully worked on and looked at. And I think I'm greatly seeing a drift away from really good port waterfront planning to more the kind of things that you are describing. I mean, I remember how long we worked on public water access at Crane Cove Park or Brannan Street Pier. And we got that, but it became more and more elusive to continue to keep mega development directly off port property. Just as recently, there was one approved down on Brannan and Seawall Lot 93, 23, 93. Numbers. Anyway, we see a major shift that is collectively driven by a different kind of consciousness.
And let's go next to John Crabtree.
Yeah, hi. Just real quick, I don't need to take a long time. Kathrin, I just wanted to say, so I'm a relative newcomer to San Francisco. I hail from Iowa. I often say this in my writings. I'm just a knucklehead hayseed from Iowa, and I say it tongue in cheek. I don't really think I'm a hayseed, but maybe I am. I don't know. I leave that to others. But here's the thing I want to say about something that you said before. The city tends to have a certain attitude about certain things. And I got to be honest with you, in my dealings with agencies and commissions and a variety of things, they tend to think that, you know, a hayseed like me doesn't, merit the same consideration as others. But I wanted to say to you, I appeared before the Planning Commission, before you and your colleagues on an appeal hearing about the West Side Emergency Firefighting Water System.
Mhm.
You and I would say Commissioner Imperial too, but you uh, were clear, and you also created within the commission this attitude where you heard what we had to say, myself and my colleagues. You were interested. You asked to engage questions. You didn't look at me as if no, you're not from here, so you don't matter, kind of thing. That was a refreshing thing, and it wasn't. It was you, but it wasn't just you. And I think that the reason the rest of the commission also kind of struck that attitude probably is because of you. I wanted to say it's a rare thing in my experience with city government here in San Francisco for someone to be accepting of someone that they don't know, that maybe is new, that's maybe a different voice or just has emerged lately or something like that. I I want to thank you. I've heard from many people you have a long track record of doing incredibly good work. I've seen some of it myself. I think it's been extremely important. But I also wanted to thank you for listening to the voices that don't so often get heard. It's a very special thing. You're a very special person because of it. The city will and the commission will suffer for your absence. But thank you for your service.
Thank you, John.
And Mary Liza, you had another question?
Actually, I wanted to do what everyone else has done and thank Kathrin for her years of helping us. And we look forward to continuing with you, if we may, during your, I'm going to call it retirement, but I know you're not retiring. So your rest period from the constant abuse from certain parties. But I just wanted to say thank you for asking me to help you, even though you didn't need any help, getting re-acknowledged, so or reassigned. So anyway, we look forward to seeing more of you now in a different way. Thank you so much.
And George, you're up.
Thank you. Kathrin, I wanted to ask one more question. Um, we suffered through the state housing element, which I found almost unbearable to read as a layperson, even with some knowledge. Then we suffered through the mayor's housing and family plan, which I felt was worse. And what I felt was the entire thing was basically a trap and a trick. And I don't know if I'm correct yet, and that's where I'm leading. In that, what they were trying to do is they always talked about height and zoning. But I always felt that they were really building a roadmap to demolition in the city. So it was more to me about demolition than it was about height because they can't get any money to build anything. And that's why they're making concessions like shadow, um, different zoning, state coming in. Um, so now, last week, all you heard about was affordable housing. Oh, we have to help people get affordable housing. Okay, I am for helping people get affordable housing. The MOHCD is broke, except what they got for bond money. They're not going to get anything from the federal government. The state is broke as well. So the affordable housing was to fall on developers. And last week, they lowered that standard from 15
5.
to 5. That's right. You still got it. So, and where they're going is 0. It will take, I would predict, in less than 3 years, developers, because they're going so slowly, they will not have an affordable housing element at all. So I was just wondering if you agreed with me, and uh, you know, are there going to be any poor people left? Uh,
I think all of us will be joining the poor people because the houses we own or condominiums we own as small forms of ownership will all be falling to prey for upzoning and higher returns. And they're already, like in Florida, you can see the systematic elimination of people who live on desirable sites. And San Francisco is built on the equitable principle that at least we all have a visual partake of seeing the bay. That is why the regularized grid overlaid on San Francisco topography is so amazing. And that's why the urban design plan I referenced earlier was so essential to continue that tradition. You can live all the way inland and can still see the bay because that view belongs to all of us. But as you start to clog up the waterfront and the better sides with tall buildings, we'll all be falling into poverty unless the small homes we own further inland are being sold to people who will even build taller buildings in order to meet the numbers coming out of Sacramento. I'm very cynical about this approach because this is kind of creating a car without a driving manual, and that is what the Lurie plan is. It is basically an idea driven by somebody who is totally aphysical, doesn't have any idea about building and architecture or how you put a good city together. I'm not even sure if he has ever traveled into any good city that he understands what that means.
yeah, no, I already fought on the Bay side, on the wall on the waterfront, with Aaron Peskin and Louise Rennie to keep them from building Miami-style houses and blocking. And here's what happens when you live long enough. Now, on the west side of San Francisco, I'm going to be battling to keep the taller buildings, 80 feet, 90 feet, from blocking the entire view of District 4 and possibly District 1 as well.
You
So,
see, I would suggest, George, and I love your fighting spirit. You have been there literally on all and every subject matter. We should very carefully examine on what sites in that area, near or at the ocean front, what are the appropriate heights. And there are certain heights, 4 to 6 story, etc. But I would not ever take on the battle about just one spot and one height, but would take it on as the city has failed all of us to give us a collective vision of the city of the city of the future. Where is height? We need to densify that as fine. It's just a question, how can we sensitively do that? And I've been basically speaking till I'm blue in the face to also examine different smaller housing types, i.e. the single stair, exiting stair prototype, typical in Europe, already practiced in Portland and Seattle. But we are basically falling on deaf ears here to use new building prototypes and new ideas to achieve density.
And Steve Ward will be our last question. Steve, go ahead and unmute. Steve, are you there? You've got to unmute.
Yeah, okay. Hi, my name's Steve Ward. I'm a native citizen in My father goes back to fighting this stuff when they wanted to build the Fontana Towers down there. That was when the former speaker was referring to as to the towers. But I just wanted to offer this simple analogy that I have, and that is if you're sitting into a theater where it's a concave structure, and the people in front stand up. So what do the people behind them have to do in order to see the show? They have to stand up. And that's what exactly is going to happen. And it's just a shame because what happens is the properties behind these properties. First of all, the properties in front, they maintain their value because nobody can build in front of them, so they maintain their value over time. The properties behind them lose their value because they lose their views. They're caught in shadow. Then all of a sudden, large corporations come in, combine the lots, and build higher. This is what happened in New York. If I was the real estate and a developer industry, what I would want to do is have all the possible options aboard that I could use at all. And then the first places I would build would be straight down the coast, all the way around Golden Gate Park, all along the bay, all along the edges of the bay, all in front. In the meantime, our where we need population in the middle of the city, those places would suffer because why do that first?
Steve, you have a question?
Yes, I just want to know if there's anybody that reflects what I think is both of our perspectives that's left on the board that we can support.
I think we all need to start from scratch, and that is, I think, unite around common interest values that I believe are the hallmark of the urban design plan of the early 70s. That is a time when citizens united not only against the freeway revolt, but also against the high-rise revolt. And that created an urban design plan that is solely based on common interest values. Common interest values is what needs to drive development rather than individual parcels, front or back or whatever. That is where the problem lies. If everybody's only out for themselves to maximize their interest, that is exactly where you will end up today. And those who have the most money will always win. So we need to return to an understanding that only common interest values that we all buy into is indeed the beginning of change. And we would start all over. I'll be happy to give you sometimes a talk about what in San Francisco common interest values mean or meant in the mid-70s when we practiced as architects, as designers around those ideas.
Thank you for your service.
I'd like to thank both our speakers tonight. I've learned so much. And in August 18th, our next speaker will be Jeremy Mack from Project Phoenix, talking about money in the November elections, which ties into issues these ladies have brought up tonight, where unfortunately money talks. And when you've got $1 billion, you've got a lot you can get done, unfortunately.